Good evening and welcome to the June 18th, 2018 meeting of the Coeur d'Alene Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. Why don't we get started with roll call?
Commissioner Cranston?
Here.
Commissioner McDowell?
Here.
Commissioner Lean?
Here.
Commissioner Tate? Commissioner Hill?
Here.
Commissioner Wood?
Here.
Commissioner Edinger?
Here.
Commissioner Hart?
Thank you, Melissa. Bridget, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
You bet.
Get everybody to stand.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, does any of the members tonight have a conflict of interest with any of the agenda items?
Yeah. None here.
Nope.
There are none. We have a couple of presentations tonight, so our only action item tonight is going to be review and approval of the April 16th meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look them over? Is there any comments, corrections, or a motion to approve?
They appear to be in order to me. I would make a motion that we approve the minutes from April 16th.
Second?
Second.
The motion to approve the April 16, 2018 meeting minutes has been made by Commissioner McDowell and seconded by Commissioner Hill. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The minutes are approved. That brings us to our staff report. Bill, what do you have for us tonight?
We've got a few things to catch up on. Our recreation side of our business has got the Skyhawks camp. You can go sign up for that at www.skyhawks.com. We've got things here at McEwen Park. We've had a outdoor baseball camp last week. There's some more going on in July. We've got a mini Hawks camp for soccer, baseball, and basketball, beginning golf, lacrosse camp, multi-sports, again, soccer and baseball, basketball, flag football, outdoor volleyball camp. And so if you go online, you can get all those informations at our website or their website. So that's available to everybody. It's a bunch of kids were out there this last week dodging the rain. Also, we are having our Iron Kids this weekend. So on Saturday, Melissa's going to be out there with some of our folks signing kids up for the run here at McEwen. You can also go on our website at cdaid.org, and you can sign up through our rec page. You click on the Parks tab event, and you can get to the application from there. So the kids are going to run around a half mile or full mile run for kids from ages 3 to 13. The cost is $20, and each athlete will receive a race bib, a finisher shirt, a medal, and a goodie bag. Tomorrow and the following day, the 19th and 20th, we have some Tubbs Hill tree work scheduled. We've done this a couple years now with the fire department. It's some training for them to fell trees. We've taken advantage of this partnership that gives us some training, and we can drop some dead trees on Tubbs Hill and get them out of the way. So that's going to be taking place tomorrow and the next day. With that, I'm going to go and show you some of the stuff that I couldn't talk about last time because we had some issues with this program. So we all know about the K-27. I just wanted to show you some of these nice pictures that we had from the evening. John Mueller's here who did this wonderful design, and Clearwater Summit did the installation. But here is the thin blue line, and we all know what that represents. A little update on the park itself. Next week, or well, let me see, this week will be, the contractor will be touching base with us that's going to build the skate park. Evergreen Skate Park will be here. Hopefully they're going to start work next week. The parking lot is open, although it's fenced from this point along here to here. The parking lot's open, but the rest of the facility here is not. The contractor should be done by mid-July on the restroom facility and the pavilion or the gazebo that's attached to it. And at that point, we'll be able to open that back up. I wanted to show you something else that we've done is that's that new skate park design, and that's what's going to go in this location. So this is the plaza style. The difference in this design is this bowl actually comes to the northern edge, and this gets pushed forward. This is the installation, this is the playground that our staff installed at this spot right here. We have a few playground safety technicians, and so we installed this, I couldn't say in our off-season because it was more like late spring and we were really pushed to get it done in time, but we got that one in. We also installed a swing set. This is at Bryan Field. So we had an old crummy swing set we removed, and the crew just installed this and finished up last week. On June 13th, we went out in partnership with Kootenai County Noxious Weeds, and a gal by the name of Shelley Hinderman helped us out with our staff, and we sprayed. You know what this is up here? This picture? Houndstooth. So noxious weed up at Seagraves Park, the epicenter of Kootenai County. Just joking. So this is what it looks like. It has these little seed pods that are kind of like Velcro, and this is how it spreads so readily with wildlife and dogs. It attaches to their fur, and they can transport it everywhere. But anyway, we had a spray day up there, and it was very successful. So, and I think that brings us up.
Any questions for Bill? Christie?
Comments, thank you. Bill, awesome report. You touched on a number of things. First of all, thank you. Isn't it hound's tongue?
Well, I call it houndstooth, hound's tongue. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
it's
one
all
or the other.
gross.
But this one, I may have said hound's tooth, but yeah, hound's tongue is what it is.
But I know that the neighbors up there so appreciate your effort and your work with the county to address that. It's going to take more than what city and county can do. Private residences really need to get out and pull those weeds and keep them from spreading, so I hope they do. I know that people up there keep looking for that kind of level of cooperation.
We're glad to do it.
Yeah, you did a nice job. The other thing, I see that John's in the crowd, and you displayed a beautiful photo of the memorial. So John, I just want to tell you, I've personally visited many, many, many times, and it is, when we asked for you to do this, when I say we, the committee led by Mayor Widmeyer, we knew that we wanted something special for Greg Moore. But your vision is what it is translated into, and it's so beautiful. I was there just yesterday. I go there a lot. And there were so many people, there's a lot of people in the park, by the way. Everyone loves McEwen Park. But so many people just walk up to the memorial and they silently just look at it. And they read the rocks. And I think it's like a magnet. It draws people in. It's exactly what we wanted. And it's just incredible. And I really appreciate your work on it. It's just fabulous. It's beautiful. So thank you for that. There was something else Bill said, but I have forgotten.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, you get a second chance, Christie, because now it's time for commissioners if they have any comments or announcements to make.
Gosh,
Maybe it'll come back to you.
Yeah, come back to me. You go ahead.
Okay. Okay, there are none. Is there anyone in our audience tonight that wishes to speak that isn't here already for one of the agenda items? Okay. Well, that's going to bring us to our first presentation then. Members of Architects West will be here to give a little informational presentation on the grandstands memorial. Bill, do you want to add any comments or lead in?
Right, so I've been working with Steve Roth and John Mueller on this project. We've been working really closely together, and they were at a point where I thought it was a good time for them to share some information that we've been putting together for you. So I was at their office, a week or 10 days ago, and they had a slide presentation I asked them to bring and share with you guys. So
Great.
With that, I can bring up Steve and John, the tag team in this, I think.
Appreciate you coming tonight and giving us this presentation.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thanks for having us. we got a little slideshow here. We're going to get fired up. Okay, so we're here tonight just to give you a little update on where we stand with the current status of the Memorial Field Grandstands restoration design. We've been working with Bill quite a bit on this, and we're going to show you some pictures about what it may look like and a little bit about the scope of what's being done to it, what can be afforded and what may not be able to be afforded, but we might suggest you consider. So anyway, we'll go ahead and go through this. This is what we're going to talk about. First, the design process status. We're going to go over the schedule really briefly. A little bit about the structural modifications that are required to make this building stand up for another 50 or 100 years. The current design, the look and layout of it, and then we'll talk a little bit about budget. This is where we stand in the process. We're about halfway through. Tonight, we're coming to talk to you and show you where we stand currently. We've done quite a bit of research and drawing up to this point, and we're approaching kind of decision time with this board and the city and Ignite to make sure that where we stand with design is what everyone wants, and then we can move forward with that. The next steps would be to complete the bid documents and then put this project out to bid, select a general contractor. This is a basic schedule. The blue is where we are right now. We're in June, a little past halfway through design. The plan is to finish by the end of July to have a 100% complete set of bid documents that we can put out on the street. Bid during the month of August, start construction 1st of September, work through the winter, and open the facility or reopen the facility in hopefully March, maybe April, in time for the next sports season.
I'm smiling because I've been pushing Steve, and these lines, I've been trying to get the lines to go to the left. And so we go back and forth and back and forth.
So far, I've been winning.
So far, he's been winning.
Here we have a few slides here with a list of structural improvements. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but the yellow highlight represents items that must be done to this building to ensure that it stands up and to have it comply with current code. So in the foundation, there's a few things that we've got to do. There's some settlement that's going on. There's some cracking that's happening. Those items have to be repaired. In the wall framing is done in a way that would never be acceptable these days. So there's quite a bit of reinforcing we have to do in terms of sistering up studs, adding shear reinforcement into those existing walls so the building continues to stand. Relative to the roof, there's a couple things that we've got to do, and now we get into there's some optional things that you might consider doing to this building that aren't absolutely required but are definitely recommended by our structural engineer that went through the building, did his investigation, and has created a report. These are excerpts from his report. So a couple items must be done to that roof structure. Oops. I don't know what that means. Well,
Hates us.
yeah. Not sure what's going on with the technology here. Pardon me. Maybe I can. Well, I'm not sure what's happening, but I guess my slideshow has kind of disappeared. So allow me to copy it here onto the desktop and restart. Hold on for just a minute. Hey, back in business.
That was a good save.
So, okay, the bleachers and the interior framing are kind of the last piece of this building that needs to be addressed structurally. There's really only one item that we've got to do to it. There's some wood that is in contact with the ground that's not pressure treated. All wood that's in contact with the ground or with concrete must be pressure treated. So we've got to make that change. But in addition to that, many of you have maybe sat in those seats or walked up and down and or maybe been inside and looked under, and it's a little bit scary the way it's built. So there's a lot of things on this list that of course, we would highly recommend that you consider doing, but the yellow are the have-tos.
One of the things we did at the start of the project was to conduct a search for historical images. And one of the things we wanted to do was to make sure whatever we brought to you had a basis in history, that the modifications would be or would reflect what historically has been done for old structures, old wood structures in Coeur d'Alene. This first photo, if you back up, just Steve, this is a 1946 shot of the construction of the grandstand that we have now. In that time, they tore the old grandstand down to the ground and rebuilt it, enlarged it a little bit, and rebuilt it to what we have today. So what is there is well over 70 years old. And so in our search, we sort of went forward, found a series of images. So go ahead and go forward, Steve. If you haven't seen this photograph, it's quite remarkable. This is a photograph of the very first grandstand in the park. And I would call your attention to, let's just see the laser, and if I can find the laser. That building right there is the Battery Building, or now what is known as the Human Rights Center. And so this grandstand sat in the center of what is the southern part of the park today, somewhere around where the large picnic shelter is. Baseball was played south of...
Please use the mouse.
Okay. Baseball was played south of the Mullen Road. And so we began to look at what types of expression, structural expression, architectural expression that we saw. We began to see things, the bracing, the columns. We saw that the ends were open and open to the air. But you can kind of see how the roof line has been repeated down through the years to today. So next one, if you would, Steve. There we go. We also looked at other buildings, historical buildings, bracing, railings, all those kinds of things in and around the fort, in and around downtown, to see if we could export some of that and bring it forward. Yard arms, as we say, railing structural pieces. And we wanted to be able to kind of give you something that historically was accurate and had some basis for going forward. And this image here is of the bandstand that was in the original Blackwell Park, and you can begin to see what they had done, treatments under eaves and at railings. Understanding we've got some modern day code stuff related to heights of drop-offs, guardrails, things like that we have to deal with. But some of these things we wanted to export and make use of, if possible, for our design. And so as we've looked at the placement of it, one of the things we have talked about, because of this east side, or this portion that faces the hot sun, this is a really warm space. And so we talked about the ability to kind of break that, what we might do depending upon how the floor plan worked itself out. We were very intrigued about how that original grandstand had opened up, and there had been some discussion about ticket booths and concession and things like that. And so we looked at maybe the opportunity to open these corners up to provide some sunshade, rain, weather, whatever, but also maybe there's a shed roof that might peel off of this to break the impact of the sun. There's another issue that goes with this, and as we looked at it and kind of looked at this edge that exists today, because originally the parking lot that was there was paved right up to it, there was a lot of drip off the roof, and the first 24 inches had a lot of exposure to moisture. And that's where a lot of the damage and a lot of the work we have to do in sistering and kind of refurbishing this comes forward. And so as our ideas kind of went forward, we began to piece the design concept together. And Steve can talk a little bit about the floor plan, how that drops in.
So the historical photos that John showed have been super valuable to us thanks to his research, and those will become relevant a little bit later in the pictures that we're showing here. But I want to go over what the layout of the building is. So this is on the main or level, ground level, so the plaza is out here. So all of these spaces are just off of that plaza space, and these were spaces that were requested initially as part of the program or the needs within that building. And this is what we're able to fit in there. So you can see, kind of going from right to left, we've cut out the corners of the building, and we'll come back to that and talk about it a little bit later. But just adjacent to that cutout is we have a small park storage room. We've got the home team locker room right here with an associated restroom. There's an entry vestibule into that right here. From the home locker, there's access and stairs down into a dugout space that opens out onto the field. Right next to home locker is a concession space to be leased out and an associated storage room with that. So within the concessions, we're installing some basics, a 3-compartment sink, a hand sink, and stub outs for certain utilities, not knowing exactly what the concessionaire is going to plan to do in there. Right next to concessions, we have women's room, men's room, both accessible directly to the outside. And I should back up, the concession space here has a service window, roll-up counter shutter that addresses customers to the outside. On the other side of the restrooms, we've got the visitor locker room with its entry vestibule to prevent sight lines and an associated restroom. That locker room does not have access into the dugout. Home locker is on this side of the building so that it's most easily accessible from the parking and has the best access into the dugout. Visitors is on the other side of the building, so it's more closely associated with the other side of the field. Right next to visitors locker, there's a ticket booth with a service window here and a counter shutter that opens to the outside. There are 2 spaces in the back labeled field storage. What those are is spaces that are too low because of the slope of the grandstands for people to walk into. So what we're thinking there is there might be access doors that open out onto the field. So if there's some equipment that's being used for field maintenance, it can be sort of slid in there and kept out of the way, but it's really not a space for people. It's more like a storage cabinet. You might think of it that way. And then as John talked about, ramp on the right and stairs on the left. The seating plan, not a lot of changes to this. We have added 2 locations right here and here for accessible seating so that we can roll a pair of wheelchairs into each of those spots, something that doesn't exist on the grandstands right now. In the middle, we've added an optional scoring platform. So this is something that probably isn't included in a base bid for this project, but could be an alternate or an option. We'll get into that a little bit more later also. So we've left the rest of the seats generally in the same arrangement, and depending on how closely you squish people together, you can get somewhere between 600 and 800 people in the grandstands. So this is generally what it looks like, and this is where John's historical photos kind of come back into relevance. So this is looking at I'll call it the back of the grandstands that faces the carousel. We've got the roof overhang here that covers the concession window and entry into the restroom. So if there are lines or people waiting, they're waiting under cover and in shade. These are the corner cutouts, one on each corner, and they're relative to the picture that John talked about a little bit earlier of the original grandstand. And what we've tried to do with this is a couple of things. One, recognizing that this grandstand that exists there now was not actually the first one, and to bring the original one back and blend the 2 essentially together into one historical item that represents the history of that field and grandstands all the way back. So that's what we've tried to do, and that's what the corner cutouts represent. They also provide a little bit of a functional shelter for waiting for tickets here. On the other end, there's electrical panels that, instead of being on the exterior wall, are now relocated to be under cover, under the cutout. And the third thing it does is kind of architecturally, it lightens up the mass of this structure. Right now we have a box that's sitting on the ground, and by hollowing out those corners, we add more people space. We don't need those spaces for functional program space, and we have a building then that looks a little bit lighter weight than and less imposing than it does if you walk by that face of it right now.
Should we talk about the letters?
John, you can talk about the letters.
We've been having this argument in the office about whether we should have Memorial Field on the back of it or not. And the argument goes something like this. People like myself who grew up in Coeur d'Alene, we didn't have that as kids. We always knew that it was Memorial Field. And so in the recent past, when that came forward and was put up, and you know, some of us have said we didn't care for it, but that's what it was. You talk to more recent additions to our community like Steve and others, they really like that. They think that is the coolest thing. And so we've been laughingly going back and forth about whether that's appropriate or not and looking at different, font styles. And so we've sort of landed at this Memorial Field tag here, and certainly would be interested to hear what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, John and I debate a lot of topics in the office in a very friendly way, but I remember coming to town, my experience with this was driving by, and it has the words Memorial Field up there, and at the time, I didn't recognize what it was or its significance, but the fact that it had such a huge label on it, to me, said, okay, this must be a really, really important place and a really important building, even though I didn't get the depth of it at that time. So to me, that signage was always a very important piece of the significance of the building. And, but I see John's point also, so we go back and forth. So right now the drawings show a sign put back on the building, and that's what we would, I think, recommend doing at this point. You can also see, right now that building is 100% green in its current existence. So we've balanced that out a little bit with some trim color. So call it a tan or a beige or some contrasting, we haven't picked colors yet, but a contrasting color that highlights some of the edges of the building and again breaks up some of that massiveness of that back wall just a little bit. Up here, you can, across the top, you may remember there's sort of a horizontal grill system to keep people from falling off of the top seat. What we did is to bring back the vertical and X combination of bracing and guardrail style that you can see in the photos over to the right that are representative of a kind of a strong local history of architecture. So the elements that we've brought back into this building not only represent the history of the grandstand, but kind of local architectural history in general. It's the pieces that we see in John's photos. So it's kind of a statement of where Coeur d'Alene came from and is headed. This is the other side of the grandstand. So we're looking at the seating side. We're going to need to rebuild the front guardrail that keeps people from falling onto the field. You can see some of the accessible seating and a potential scoring platform. The seats themselves, we'll get into a little bit more detail on what might be done with those. And again, some of the different color of trim that we might do to the building. You can see the underside of the roof is a contrasting color. One of the optional structural upgrades is to pull off the existing roof decking that's up there. A lot of it's broken, there's a lot of water damage, and replace it with essentially a plywood product turned upside down. Think of a T111, but it's a grooved plywood that looks plank style but has a lot more strength than the existing planks do. So we'd have the opportunity to change some colors up there fairly easily if we were to do that. Okay, so I want to talk about the siding just a little bit. Why restore this building, I guess, and what is it that people think of or what is important about it that we want to be honest to when we restore it. And a lot of it really comes down to the siding. We're changing the shape of the building just slightly at the corners. The rest of it's really staying the same. So what historically is important? Well, it's the siding. So we have kind of a Dutch lap existing profile up here. It's in pretty poor shape. The paint is peeling off. It's heavily weathered. One of the structural upgrades that needs to be done is sheathing panels need to be applied to the exterior walls to keep them from racking. So it can be applied to the inside of the wall, but that's very complicated. The simplest solution is to pull off the existing siding, apply the new shear panels, and apply new siding then over the top of that. And that's what we're recommending be done. But the new siding would match the profile of the existing siding and be, rather than a latex painted product, it might be a solid color stained product, which would be easier to maintain and keep a good look of it. But there would be maintenance involved still in that siding. So something that could be further discussed, but that's where we stand right now with the siding. We want to talk a little bit about these roof, this is the underside of the roof deck in this picture right here. So you can see some of the water damaged and broken planking that's up there. If that were to be removed and replaced with a more suitable structurally sound product, we may consider reusing some of that roof decking in a way such as this example picture shows, under some of the exterior spaces, possibly even inside the building. And this could be done as well with some of the existing siding that's removed if its condition is acceptable for restoration and reuse in kind of a non-weather exposure type of way. So that's something that we're looking into. Bleacher detail, what do we do with those existing bleachers? In the base bid, what we probably can afford to do is repaint them, frankly. But there are some options to do some other things to them, and this detail on the left is intended to show some surfacing wrap around those and a potential addition of aluminum seating. So this may be an example of a couple of the products that could be used to kind of reskin those bleachers. One thing that has to be done, again structurally, down on this main walkway is a layer of plywood needs to be added over that walkway to reinforce it. So then we've got to finish that or create a walking surface on it that's durable and maintainable as possible. So that may be a rubber athletic flooring, it may be a rubber sheet, it may be something else. But what we'd like to try and do is stay away from paint as much as possible because that's a heavy maintenance cost for the city and we want to avoid that. Bleachers, again, people right now are sitting on the surface of those seats. They can still do that, it's just fine. However, considering adding a bench type or a bench with back aluminum bleacher that's bolted to the face or the surface of the existing bleachers is a viable option. Again, probably a cost alternate in this case, something that could be added to the project, but would certainly make it a much more comfortable and I would say usable facility for the city. So budget, this is a budget that was established for the project before we started work. $811,000 is basically the base bid number, including sales tax, that we are trying to target. And we're not providing cost estimate at this meeting, but what we have done is take a look at what would be included in a base bid and what might be options, and I've referred to some of them. So base bid items are all of the required structural upgrades and repairs. Replacing all of the existing siding with new and constructing all of the spaces inside the grandstand that we showed in the floor plan, the new shed roof off the back, the signage. Safety netting, which I didn't mention earlier, is in the front of the grandstand right now is covered with chain link fence to prevent the attendees from being hit by foul balls. It's in poor condition. We would remove that, replace it with flexible baseball stadium netting, essentially, that could be retracted potentially up and down, either manually or motorized, so that during a game it can be lowered, and for some other type of event it can be raised for a little bit better view.
And we have talked about the other possibilities with this upgrade, depending upon where it lands, or perhaps with the options that could come later if somebody wanted to. What are the other uses that could happen at this site? And so the netting part of it, being able to take it up or take it down, say for some kind of concert or some kind of performance activity, I think would be very useful in terms of making that more successful.
The new front guardrail, the ramp and stair on the two sides, the new dugout, the accessible seating, meaning the wheelchair spaces, and then repainting of the existing bleacher treads and risers, which would not be our first choice, but these are the things we believe are going to be affordable within that budget. These are the options that you might consider, and ultimately there will be costs applied to all of these. The first one is all of the optional structural upgrades. That's something that for the long life of the building is highly recommended. It doesn't have to be done, but definitely would be a good idea. Aluminum bleacher seats, either benches or benches with backs. New bleacher steps, and what that means is there are the small steps that you walk up and down. I think there are 4 rows of them. Right now, the proportion of those steps is a little bit smaller than the rise and run of the bleachers. Accessibility code requires that you make a set of stairs as even as possible in rise and run, and they have certain dimensions that we adhere to, but in this case we can't because of the way this thing is built. And we've talked to the city, they're okay with that, but to remove those steps and rebuild them to an even rise run is going to make the travel up and down safer for anyone walking up and down those steps. Relocating field lights from poles to roof. Right now there are lights on poles right in front of the seats. We would take those lights and set them on the roof and remove those 2 poles to get them out of the way of play and out of the way of view.
In the original 47 redesign, the second generation one we have now, the lights were actually on the roof. And at some point they brought them back down on poles. And so we've been trying to figure out a way to make that happen within the budget, and we can't quite get there. So
Gutters, downspouts, and storm drainage along all the edges of the roofs to help protect the building from the splashing of water as it hits the ground and also protect the play field. Plywood subfloor and surfacing on the bleacher treads and risers. That's the slide I showed earlier about refinishing and a new subfloor on those. And then the scoring platform is kind of the last option. Of course, other things could be added to the options list, but these are the ones that we would strongly recommend that you consider. And that's where we stand at the moment. Open to questions.
Mike? Yeah, good work.
Yeah.
Of the optional elements, do you have a sense of priority for those elements in terms of how they should be considered?
Yes, we haven't prioritized them in this list. I think, though, number one is the first priority, the structural upgrades. That has to do with the building's lifespan. The more of that we can do, the more life we're going to get out of the building. Looking down the list right here, I would also say number 6, in my opinion, is a high priority. Just protecting this building from damage by water is a big deal.
Even though we've done those things with opening the corners, the shed roof, we still have some exposed area, splash, and so if you look at the structure now, it's on life support based on that portion of the building that has been replaced, and the splash part of it's a big deal.
Numbers 2, 3, and 7 up there, I would group all into one as a priority. To refinish the treads and risers of the bleachers and add aluminum benches. And part of the reason to add those benches is right now you're sitting on the surface that people are walking on and they're spilling their drinks on. To add those benches, you're elevating people sitting away from that walking surface. It's just going to be a much better situation for sitting on the bleachers and watching a game. So 2, 3, and 7 I'd put together and probably make the next priority.
And it may not be necessary to do all the seats with backs. There could be maybe a premium section, a booster section, whatever, where you specially recognize if there are donors to the project. I don't know how this will go forward. A lot of times in the stadium projects we do for large high schools, we have a dedicated section where we have regular seating, and then the center of it we have seats with backs or with rails or both, and it's paid for by a booster group or I think back in the 20s we had the Memorial Field Athletic Association, and they raised the money for the original work, and so something like that where you have a place for special events.
Relocating the field lights, if we were to talk to NIC, I think they would put that much higher on the list than we would. But definitely would love to see that happen. It's not an absolutely necessary thing. And then the scoring platform's an item that could easily be added at any time in the future. So I wouldn't put that high on the now priority list.
Mr. Chair.
Sure, Christie.
Well, that was just a great presentation. Can we go back to the picture of the overall, the finished product?
This one? The other one?
Yes,
This one?
so that's beautiful. I like the Memorial Field letters because this is our field of dreams. I also like that cardinal a lot. So some of the discussion that we had, NIC, contributed to the paying for this project. And some of the discussions that we had were that there would be some recognition for NIC, so I like seeing the cardinal. But I have a question. It is a nice flag, but how difficult would it be, and if you would talk to your committee, what about on the home team locker door as you go in? Couldn't there be a cardinal? NIC Cardinals, we're just going to spend a lot of time there. And it was quite a contribution. Just a thought for you to take back to the committee. But anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. I look forward to enjoying some games there. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve and John, when the Four Corners and BLM corridor master plan was completed, one of the elements I think that was in that master plan that was of interest to this commission would be kind of an architectural treatment on that east facade and how you address that. And you've done quite a bit toward that with the detailing of the building and the new shed roof on the back. The other thing that has been of interest, I think, is providing shade elements within that Memorial Plaza that could be used by people waiting, using the carousel and those kinds of things. And I think you mentioned the fact that it is a hard surface space. This probably isn't in your working budget right now, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on that shed roof and treatment on that facade, if that could be embellished to provide additional covered seating area within the plaza. And
There may be a way to-
and if that could be, you know, blended such that it works with the architecture of the building.
There may be a way to address that, Scott, and maybe it's just a temporary structure, and whether it's shade cloth or it's something else that gets set up. I know Bill has talked about if there's a concession, they might want to expand and have an enclosed or controlled area, you know, where your activity is regulated. You get in, you don't get out, or you can't come in and go out with regularity. And so we can take a look at that. We were trying to manage budget and not have to reconstruct or remove what has already been placed and lose the value of that investment. And so we've been also, if you look at the elevation where this strikes this back facade, we've been talking about, should this be higher? Should this project out a little further? Should we find a way, you know, to maybe enlarge that? And we've wanted to be careful with that because we felt like we had a pretty good balance. And you know how it is. It can get out of hand in a hurry. And so we want to be careful.
I think personally I'd be interested to see, you know, what kind of design thought you could give to it, whether it be some type of a phased addition onto the building. If it's something that this group truly felt, you know, had a high priority, we would find a way to fund it at some point. But
well, maybe we'll throw it on the table on a Thursday afternoon charrette and talk about it.
Sure.
And see what we can come up with.
I'd like to add a little bit to John's answer also, in that you can see the columns that support the shed roof here. There are 4 of them. Those sit on existing foundations that are already in the ground. So that's why they are where they are right now. That's partly why it extends the way it does, because we were trying to not have to redo really any of that plaza space. But I really like what you're saying. You know, we'd love to be able to look at expanding that, creating a little bit more shade and covered area, and kind of digging into that plaza just a little bit more to make that a really good people space in there.
What you're not seeing in this illustration, what we don't have the benefit of, is there are shade trees planted as part of that plaza, there is a series of planters just west of the carousel that have trees that will get large at some point and cast shade. So I think that'll all come into play in the consideration of what you want. So.
Mr. Chair, one more
Christie?
question along the lines of what Scott is saying. The enhancements, the list that you provided, are there dollar figures with that? So, for instance, on the score box, is that what you called it?
Yeah, the answer is yes, there will be dollar figures associated with all of those. So it'll essentially be like a shopping list.
So if there were booster clubs or whatever that wanted to come forward, it'd be nice to have an idea of what that might be.
And that's something we intend to provide.
Great, thank you.
Ron?
With the generous contribution that the college will give us.
Did give. Did give. You already got the check.
Oh, I haven't seen it, so
It's in the mail.
where's the rest of the money coming from?
Ignite.
What?
The Ignite board. So Tony's board they're the reasons for us moving forward. When we were doing all this work in this area, it was their board that said, gosh, we're doing all this work, why don't we look at the grandstands while we're at it? And so they allocated $1 million to have these gentlemen do this research for us and put together the bid documents. And NIC's contributed 1.5, is that right?
150,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where the funding is coming from, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
I've got another question. It may be a question that's already been ask of you when you began this process, and if it has, it might come up again as you kind of take this and move the project forward. But in the beginning, did you look at the kind of the financial feasibility of the remodel or renovation of the existing structure versus constructing a new replica type building?
Well, so, Mr. Chairman, at the time we were hired, that question did come up, and we were directed that the restoration was predetermined, that was decided, that's the way we were going. So we didn't really look into what it would take to do a new structure at that time. But what I can tell you is that based on the estimating that we've done so far relative to cost, knowing what we're doing here, and envisioning what it would take to tear down the existing and essentially build this brand new, and that's part of the question, is what would be the scope of new. So if we say we're going to replicate it, we're money ahead by saving it. And I know that, and I know that has been a big question, is how much is it really going to cost to save this thing? But where we stand right now with the base bid dollars, there's many options that we can add to this building and expand it to the point where it wouldn't make financial sense anymore, maybe to save it. But where we stand currently, we are definitely better off financially to restore the building.
That's always been my gut feeling, but it's a good answer. I just wanted to be sure that it got asked at some point, and
It's a question I asked
some
early
thought was
on,
given to
Scott,
it. Yeah.
and that's sort of how, as we worked through those initial steps, that's where we ended up, because I wondered the same thing. But as you begin to look at it, you walk through this, you talk with the structural engineers, who, by the way, were really excited. It's funny to see them. They come in and they were almost giddy that this thing, they said, I think the term, we have an all-wood solution, And so when you hear them say that and you hear that expressed with some pleasure, it's kind of neat to see them take interest and jump into this in the way that they have. And so the conclusion you draw just listening to all the conversations is that there is value, both dollar-wise and structurally, to a lot of what's there. And so we might as well make use of that and use that as a savings and as a means to maybe leverage into some of the other things that we wouldn't afford by going the other way.
Yeah, I guess what we're seeing after studying this and kind of living with it for a little while is that we believe it truly is worth saving, and that if we give it the right attention and the right features, that it's going to be a place that's not just for softball anymore, but could be for a lot of things. It's kind of like the if you build it, they will come thing, to be cliche, but in reality, is if it is a very nice, well done, very usable building when we're done with it, I think people are going to find other events to have here.
Well, you got a very good looking project, and you're really upgrading this to a first-class facility. So,
well, we hoped you would say that or would see that, and so we've had a lot of discussion back and forth on the pieces and parts of this, and been fun to put the history part to it. There are a lot more photographs that we considered, but we also got a limited time also in front of you, because we know there's other folks, but we hoped you'd be excited about what you saw.
Really looks nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything else for Steve and John?
Reasons for what we did, not just, it looks good. There's a historical tie, and we thought that was important.
Well, this was always going to be a sensitive project for the community, and the emotional attachment the community has to it. So the attention you've given to the kind of the historical aspect of it, I think, is well done and very important.
Yeah, I think it'll be really appreciated by, especially a lot of the old timers.
Yeah. Well,
you could be one of those now, John.
That's you now.
Well, you remember, Mike, as a kid playing Short League, We grew up on the east side of town and we played at Person. And so at the end of the season, if you had a good team, you got to go play at the big field. And that was, that was what Memorial was all about. So.
Any more questions for Steve and John? Well, again, thank you both for coming in tonight and giving us a presentation. It's exciting, and really this is the first opportunity probably most of us have really had a chance to see what you've been working on, so very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill, guess you're going to kind of introduce us to our next item, presentation that's going to be regarding the Pump Skills Flow bike track.
Correct. So Mark Putty's here to talk about that. Let me ask, the rest of you all here for the grandstands or for what Mark wants to talk about? Raise your hands. We're here for Mark.
Sweet. Okay.
All right, so we got a bunch of bicyclist enthusiasts that are interested in what we're talking about. I met with Mark and Mike and Chris Bosley, and let's see, Monty was there, right? Yep. Driving around on a cart. So this is an area along Centennial Trail near where the 95 bridge crosses it. This was identified in our Four Corners master plan as an area for cyclocross and other biking opportunities. And that's what this is, to show you what we can do there with some in-kind donation. So with that, gentlemen, it's all yours.
Well, good evening. I'm Mark Putty. I'm a landscape architect, but tonight I'm a member of the Bike Ped Committee for the city. And so they like me in that committee because I never say no to stuff. So initially I was, if we were at the south end of the Four Corners BLM plan, we have now moved effectively into the midpoint of this where I had the opportunity to get involved with Mike and his crew on a Pump Skills Flow track. And as you'll see, they're quite different. They're sort of the same, but they're quite different. So I'm gonna run the slideshow, Mike.
All right.
Oh, sorry, for context. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm Mike Gerder. I have the bike shop Vertical Earth, and I've been kind of working on this project for a while with these guys, and that's why.
And just for context, these are two portions of the Four Corners BLM master plan. Our project just happens to land and under the Highway 95 bridge is probably the easiest context where these two line up. So the first portion of this is a pump track, a pretty small component of, but an important component. And this feature would be located under the bridge.
Yeah, it's really nice that it can be under the bridge, keeps it out of the rain and shoulder seasons, keeps it in good condition throughout all of the year. It can be a really cool draw for families and kids. Like I said, in off-season times or even just days like today. There's places in like Seattle where they have huge pump tracks under bridges and they're super popular.
Just some imagery involved with it. I think we've kind of described in the back here that it's really, the biggest thing about a pump track, if you can think about it, you don't pedal through it, you pump through it. And so in this case, there's a couple examples that we've pulled together, and they are really quite small. Mike, if I remember, they
loop around. You actually get, you put a lot of effort into a short little distance because you are, like you said, you're actually pumping it, you're not pedaling it. So it's fun for kids. There's not huge bumps or anything, so even little guys can do it. Yeah, it doesn't require a huge space and can be pretty fun and effective.
Yep. So the under the bridge.
Can I
Go
ask
ahead, Bridget.
a question on,
Go ahead, Bridget.
is it similar to the 15th Street?
No, so that's a BMX track.
Right.
So that's, well, it's a race track for one, but also those are much bigger, and you can actually,
Okay.
like those you jump, big huge berms. This is like, you can actually see by like the
Yeah.
little kids on here, that is about the size of what these bumps are gonna be.
And I was sort of curious too, is that they're not very big. They're about 2,000 square feet. So if you think about your house, not my house, it's 5,000. No, I'm just kidding. But a normal person, about 2,000 square feet.
Guys, what's the difference between pump and pedal?
Well, so pedaling, so like later on when we're showing you the flow trail, that is more similar to your BMX track, where you actually pedal to get speed, to hit the berms and go over the jumps. A pump track, you can actually do laps and laps around this thing without ever pedaling, because you're actually you're picking up on the front side of the bump and you're pushing down on the back side, and so you gain your speed momentum by doing that. So it's all in the arms and shoulders and hitting the berms. So you just don't have to pedal, and it's different but fun, and actually a really good learning tool for cycling in general.
Sounds like a bit of like a swing, kind of that,
Almost, yeah.
using your body really to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a dance too when you pick up the, I can't call it flow. When you pick up the
momentum.
Momentum, there you
Okay,
go.
all right.
Semantics are important in this
Interesting.
presentation. The skills track is just a bit north of the highway, of the 95 bridge, adjacent to the pump track, but the skills track is just a little bit more focused on just those skills.
Yeah, so it's a lot of little technical features. It's like rock rollovers. You'll have skinnies, which you see here, are the little wooden narrow ramps. So you ride along. They're not really elevated in this case, so it's not too dangerous or anything. But you can just cruise along, and teaches you how to ride narrows, and you have varying degrees of like difficulty on those. And then like the rock rolls are really both fun just to learn to do it and then to get smooth at it. And then there's the other ones like the little drops you see there. And that's a real good skill if you're mountain biking, is to learn how to just drop off things. And so it's a graduated skills park. So you can start super little and just graduate your skills up.
Yeah, I think of it, this thing is a little bit more like the ski or snowboard park at the ski hill. It teaches you in a controlled environment ways to jump. Gives you ladders into that progression so that you don't show up at the big kid park. You might start at the smaller one, smaller features, and work your way into the bigger features to help hone in those skills that are going to be used maybe more in the wild or
or Canfield.
Yeah,
like you get a family who wants to go ride Canfield. It can be a little daunting, some of the even just the route drops and everything. So this is a place where you can go kind of practice the skills on how to ride some of those features you're going to find in regular trails.
And then the last component to this pump skill flows area is really the flow track. And I guess as we've talked about it now, it's almost like the graduation from the pump to the skills. Now you're into the flow.
Yeah, and this is where, kind of like your BMX track, you're going to be going faster. You have berms. The bumps are getting bigger. They're all going to be initially tabletops, so you can roll over them, or you can actually like jump over them. You're not getting way off the ground because it's a flat top to it. But,
oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the hallmarks of really a flow track, and a lot, in this case, is really the smoothness of it. It's more of a
super buff. I mean, you can use any kind of bike, hardtails or BMX bikes, things like that. But nice smooth course, just like you said, how it's kind of a swing. None of it's rough. You're not pounding anything. When you're doing it right, everything just flows. That's called a flow track.
Look at the banking on that one.
Yeah. And so we've sort of put this presentation together. I think that we understood what it was, but we wanted to present in front of you guys to get, help with some of the nuances, but then also, sort of we've been talking with Bill to look at an area to plug in programmatically fairly easily a portion of that master plan in an area that right now is, it's a pretty underutilized area, and I think we all know where we're talking about in that space. But I mean, when we're able to populate it with activity, then you tend to lose some of the other activity that you're trying to deter. So we think that adding this, but then in addition, I think I go back to the ski and snowboard park at Schweitzer. They have this graduation that that we didn't have. We just kind of learned by probably wrecking more often than not, but in this way, it's a little bit more controlled environment for you to learn, a different sort of skill that, is much more mainstream, I think, than what it used to be. And these are similar to a skate park. They're highly honed, there is directions, there is
Yeah, it takes somebody that
nuances.
actually knows how to put these together, like the pump track in particular, the flow trail as well. I mean, you have to have somebody that's skilled at that to make it work right.
Do adults use this?
Yeah, that's the cool thing is all these things are going to be really cool because families adults are going to enjoy them just as much as kids.
So, and I guess how we ended up in front of you here tonight, we've this was introduced to me in committee. I talked with Mike, went out on Mike went and flagged all of these three different areas. We went out with Bill and Monty, and and Chris, and they suggested now that we come sort of at this point, we vetted some of the options, looked at plugging in some programmatic elements, and just wanted to give you a presentation on this.
It appears the pump and the skills track are fairly compact in footprint or size. How does the flow track compare to those two?
It would be a little longer. I guess it'd almost be the same space as those other two put together. And that it starts on what we have proposed right now, starts on the south side of the bridge and continues south for about 150 meters. Right now there's that railroad grade. So it's everything there is like not really utilized at the moment, but it's along that railroad grade area it would be going.
Yeah, so I think the biggest nuance between the skills and the pump, the flow is longer. It's more a linear component than, whereas the other ones are more circular. I guess, yeah, loopy. And, yeah, the flow is much longer linear element that you kind of ride one way. You can't, like the pump, you don't, the flow, you go out, pedal back, down, pedal back, you know.
So, Commissioner, over the last several years, we've had the cyclocross in there, yes? So that's the flow area. So it's something that's already being utilized for this very item. And I think it's been 3 years?
4 years, I think.
4 years, okay. Thank you, yeah.
And Bill, feel free to weigh in on this question. I guess the consideration, the location of these 3 facilities, do you foresee any potential conflicts with water access or other pedestrian?
Not in this
type
location,
trail
no, I
uses
don't.
there?
I think it fits in with the master plan that we worked so hard on over the years, because we did identify the cyclocourse, which is the cyclocross, which is the larger piece of that. And these 2 elements are just, I think, companions to it that really enhance what we've already identified. So I think it's a great use of this spot.
Christie?
Mr. Chair, I just asked these gentlemen, it looks like it'd be a lot of fun and it would be a nice attraction. Can you tell me about any other cities you've looked at that maybe has something like this, and how is it received?
Yeah, definitely. There's actually Leavenworth has a pump track, and they just had, I think it was Pump Track Nationals, and so they had a huge influx of people coming in to ride their track, and it's actually not much bigger than what we're talking about for this one. So that's the pump track. There's well, Seattle has quite a few. I'm trying to think, I think Spokane has a pump track.
Yeah.
Portland, yeah.
The one I'm most familiar with is we just moved back from Salt Lake, so up in Park City they had these mountain bike skills parks in their parks, and they just became similar, like a lot of cycling events, becomes a venue for competition, but also becomes a catalyst usually for young people or people to mentor young people into some of these different sports, I guess they would be. And the one in Park City is fantastically popular. Mostly because it's a mountain bike town, but I mean, in this case, those are the reasons why they become mountain bike towns, is because you teach the young people, and they just turn into the mountain bikers that they are.
Yeah, it does end up being a big draw. There's even, like right now, there's just a single track down there from the cyclocross course, and you can go down on weekends or even weeknights, and there's like 3 to 5 families down there cruising around, and the kids are just having a blast. And with these, the pump track and the skills park, I think that'll only grow as far as drawing people down there.
Great. Is it going to be big enough, like similar to Leavenworth or Portland?
It's, well, the skills park, where it terminates right now, there's definitely potential to expand it farther.
Okay.
So if it is getting overutilized, it can be expanded, as well as the flow trail. The pump track's about right. I mean, we're kind of limited on what's under the bridge. There is, in the design, there's one loop that does go outside of the bridge for, like, to make it a little longer for fair weather days. But that part, the pump track, is about adequate for space.
And it seems to me a lot of the elements are, tend to be dirt mounted, so you can really change things quite easily, or enhance or enlarge or add to. And I think that would be, try this first, and then we'd look at just the ability to grow within the master plan, or within, I think what I noticed about this is we're really inside the loop of the cyclocross track, so that, you could expand almost, and I would say in some ways the cross track would probably become part of.
It could in some of the spots, yeah.
In certain spots.
Great, thank you.
Commissioners, I kind of liken this to the BMX track. If you remember, that was new to us, and it's extremely popular. And this is the same sort of deal. We have some folks here that are willing to partner with us and do the in-kind stuff. We've got a lot of dirt. It's going to take dirt and rock and logs and that kind of stuff. We can certainly wrangle those sorts of items up. We may come back to you if they get into a pinch on some of this funding, maybe out of Parks Capital if necessary. But for now, we're just here to talk about what we're perceiving to do. and move forward with some in-kind work we've got some bobcats and some tractors and flatbeds that we can haul soil around, and have these gentlemen start doing it exactly like the BMX folks did.
Yeah, and don't worry, we'll have a rake day. You guys can all come out.
So I guess next steps, Bill, I mean, this moving forward and going through a more formal approval process, what has to happen between now and bringing it forward for any type of a recommendation?
Well, I'm going to have these gentlemen, just like John and Steve, not tomorrow evening, but the following council meeting, to make this same presentation so they're aware of what we're doing and where we're going. And then as we develop more of some costs, we'll come back and talk about that a little bit.
So before we adjourn, I've got a couple of meeting announcements, but before that, last chance, Christie.
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay. Okay, if commissioners have nothing further then, I'd like to make the announcement that our next Park and Rec workshop will be held at 11:30, July 3rd. This will be at Caruso's Deli here in Coeur d'Alene. And then our regular monthly meeting is scheduled for Monday, July 16th, 5:30, right here in the library community room. Do we have any agenda items as of yet for
Not at
those
this
meetings?
point, Commissioner.
Okay. Well, with that, then I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Everybody piles onto that one.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Lean and Christie Wood, and seconded by Commissioner Ettinger. So all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.